Mr. Blue Sky, Electric Light Orchestra, ladies and gentlemen. And now, once again, he's proving very popular in our late night shows. And he's come up from London. Once, you know who I'm talking about, don't you? We don't have a lot of Southerners on our show. It's George Jessup. George, how are you doing?
Oh, hello. Yes, I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be back.
Right. Would you like me to tell the viewers what we got in store, or what do you think you're here for?
I'm all ears.
Right, George, we're going to reveal your family tree. Well, I don't do the investigations. It's my secretary Jackie. She does it, but she's very good. She's very good, and she's got all your family tree now. Your mother's maiden name was Parnell.
Yes, I can tell you about my parents and myself. Obviously, I don't have any.
George, not interested in you. Tell us about your parents.
Well, they married in the early 1950s. We lived in South London, somewhere near Clapham. My father was a great reader, a great reciter of poetry, very fond of a drink. He was an inventor. He invented, for example, the electric potato peeler. I remember, which my mother was furious about this.
Why?
Well, because he had promised her that he was going to take a proper job with a firm of accountants. He'd go off to work in inverted commas with his briefcase each morning, and she was persuaded that yes, he was going off to this firm of accountants. But it turned out that actually he'd been going and sitting in the park, and that his case contained no more than his bits and pieces for trying to make this electric potato peeler.
George, I've got a joke. I've thought of a joke. George, what do you call an electric peeler? RoboCop!
Oh, yes, very good. Yes.
Just thought of that.
Yes. It's a shame that my father's no longer alive.
He could have called it that. He could have called it RoboCop, the electric peeler.
Except that RoboCop wouldn't have meant anything to anybody then.
He'd have the copyright on the name, so when RoboCop came out, he could have sued him. You will remember Hilda.
Oh yes, Grandma Hilda. Yes.
Grandma Hilda, maiden name Schickelgrün. She was brought up in Germany, or possibly Austria, and an interesting woman because, you know, not many women get involved in politics, but there she was. It says very active politically, the 1930s.
Ah.
Do you have any, you may have some family heirlooms or relics, maybe a spoon or a flag or some insignia?
Well, not that I'm aware of.
What's a pity?
So what was her political involvement?
Anti-lesbian league.
Right. And so
there was it's not a well-known organisation. She was like the main promoter of it, and she seemed to be the general secretary of the Anti-Lesbian League, and was active. It says active in politics. That's all it says.
Oh, well, I mean, she was always very, very kind to me, but then I guess I didn't show any traces of lesbianism.
No, I'm going to go back from there. See what you think of this. Jack Parnell, curiously, Chris and John, known as Jack, he was conscripted in 1920, George, to help out the Royal Ulster Constabulary with some problems they were having in Ireland. So there he was, imposing law and order with the black and tans. George, you're looking a bit distressed.
Well, I just need to take a moment there. I mean, that's not really what I'm, not really what you'd hope to hear. Well, it's not what I.
Why ever not? He's doing a job.
Well, yes, he is, but it's a job of sort of colonial brutalism, isn't it? That
I see, George. I see. Yeah, you could. If you were Irish, you might be. I can see that. Yes, I can see that. Well, you know, there's a bad apple in every bunch. Let's go back a few years. We've got Michael. This is your mother's side, remember? Michael Parnell, 1910. This is amazing. You're connected to some famous people. Do you know who he married? He married Annie Joyce. Joyce, does that ring a bell?
No.
Lord Ho-Ho?
Oh.
Yes, indeed. Now, Michael Parnell was a merchant, and he ran guns to Sarajevo.
Did he?
Yes, he did. That's as far back as I can go with your mother's side. Colourful.
Well, so Anti-Lesbian League, Black and Tans,
Yes.
gunrunner.
Yes. Speaking of your family, you've gone a bit quiet.
Well, yes. I mean, I'd always just assumed that, they'd just be a bunch of suburban nonentities.
They're colourful. They're full of adventure. What about your family, George? Yeah, you've got a Jessup who invested in the tulip industry in 1876.
Right.
Kind of disappears from the record after that.
Well, I was going to say, that sounds benign enough.
Well, yes. I don't know exactly what happened to the tulip industry in 1876, but it sounds like a winner to me. This is incredible, really. Jackie's done some job on this. Ebenezer Jessup is in Scotland in 1698, George, 1698. And because he's married a Scottish lass. This is where it started. He's married Jeannie McGrogart, and he's gone up to live in Ayr. Guess what he does next?
I'm sure you're going to tell me.
He invades Panama. Yes, he was part of the Scottish expedition to set up a Scottish empire in the Gulf of Damien on the Isthmus of Panama.
And how did that go?
Well, is there a Scottish empire?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Do you want to go back? I've got two more for you, George. Do you want to continue, or do you need a rest?
No, I'm okay. So sorry, this is when this Ebenezer fella?
1698.
1698, and so he'd never heard of again?
Well, the trouble with the Gulf of Damien is that the English settlers and the local Spanish settlers just simply refused to trade with the Scots, and they all died of starvation.
No.
Well, most of them.
So that's probably what happened to Ebenezer.
I would guess so. Frank Jessup, who'd married Frances White in 1569. See, we've done a lot of research.
Yes.
They set up business. Oh, I'm missing that. Sorry, this is Richard. He's gone off and he's in America, and he's with his wife Elspeth. There's a lot of travelling in your family, John. They got all over the place. They crossed the Bronx, okay, where, and I quote, the land was cleared of Indians, so he could grow his apples in Wekgisgeek.
Well, sorry, what do you mean the land was cleared of Indians?
Quote, land was cleared of India. I suppose they offered them some money and an alternative accommodation.
Well, that's not always what happened, is it?
There's no record, George. I can't tell you. Richard Jessup's apples were famous all over Virginia and Pennsylvania. Apples, George.
I like an apple as much as the next man. But my word, it's hard not to reflect on the fact that history is a bloody affair.
Oh, it is. You can't delve into a person's past and not find any skeletons, George. And that brings me to the jewel in the crown, I would say. The jewel in the crown here. This is Richard's son, Candlewick. Now, Candlewick...
Candlewick?
Yes, that's his name. He was a big investor also in the Virginia Company of 1682, and he was doing very well until it collapsed with the Powhatan Uprising, and he disappears from history again. But listen to what he had, George. He did very well for himself. He had 2 farmsteads, approximately 200 head of cattle, a stable for approximately 50 horses, rich man. He had a tobacco plantation that employed 76 West Africans.
When you say employed,
yes,
under what terms?
Well, again, Jackie's very good, but she could have got the photocopies and all the signatures, and I didn't ask her because I thought, there's a little light skip through history, really.
He was a slave owner, wasn't he?
So let me just check. 200 head of cattle, 50 horses, 76. It says employed 76 West Africans. All your ancestors, they've arrived fresh-faced off the boats. with some gold in their pocket, the little they have. They've spent 3 months at sea in terrible conditions. What brave people braving the oceans.
Indeed, yes.
You know, ships' rations, terrible, terrible storms, very dangerous. Hats off, I say, to Candlewick Jessup of
Yes.
Virginia. That's a success, George. Don't you count that as a success?
Well, I would need to know more, and what you describe as colourful causes a great unease in me.
Is it the word colourful? Brave, fortitude, righteousness. God is on our side. Gott mit uns, in fact, for your Auntie Hilda. And, you know, they're doing the best for what they think is right. Well, just trying to make a buck growing apples. What's wrong with that?
The great American sociologist C. Wright Mills, I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
Just a minute. No relation.
No, he's not a relative of mine. That's not why I'm mentioning him. The reason that I'm mentioning him is this. He proposes that without personal biography, a study of the great sweep of history or consideration of theory is impoverished.
I've got a little extra snippet on John Jessup. He did pay the Indians to leave the land. He paid them in beads and blankets. That's a nice gesture, isn't it?
Well, where do you live? Do you live in a house? Do you own the house?
I am a house owner, yes. Well, a bit left on the mortgage, but yes.
Would you accept this pile of beads and blankets that I have next to me in exchange for it?
Have I ever seen a bead before? No, I haven't. So I'm looking, this is nice and shiny. Maybe I could sell this on. And blanket, all right, they already had blankets, but these must have been some kind of special blankets.
So you don't want the beads and the blankets in exchange for your house?
In current modern society, it would be a poor deal. I'm trying to put myself in the position of an Indian, and I'm living on my land, and I've not built anything. There's no opera houses there. There's no social clubs. There's nothing really. And a bloke comes from another country, and he flashes a bit of gold, well, not gold beads, flashes some beads around that you've never seen before. They're really pretty, very pretty beads. And he says, I'll give you these if you move along. Just there's lots of country, George. They weren't chucking them in the sea. They were just saying, move, go west. Don't look happy. I'm sorry, George. I thought this would be a pleasant surprise for you.
We are all of us creatures of our time, and of course we never realise what that means whilst we're active upon the face of this earth, because it takes time for understandings to formulate. However, I don't think that I can listen to anything that you told me and say that history has been kind to any of my forebears.
The failed takeover of Panama.
Well, I mean, as you say there, yes. So this is this is a sort of a hostile act, isn't it?
Now then, Mr. Jessup, please, you're the one that says frame this properly. Let's have a look. You're living in Scotland. You're recently married, young man. You want something, you want a bit of adventure. And you're looking around, you're going, oh, them English, they've got an empire. And them Spanish and them Dutch and them Portuguese, they've all got empires. Why could Scotland not have an empire?
When did you say this was? 17th century?
Yes, exactly. Middle of.
Yeah. So 17th century Mark Thatcher.
Yeah. That's good, George. That's a good analogy. Right, well, that's all I've got, George. What characteristics and qualities can you say surging through your blood as a result of that genetic tree?
Well, I mean, I was kind of hoping that I might hear that some of my forebears were scholars or writers or artists, even.
You mean like Silas Foster, one of the founders of Oxfam, one of my ancestors?
Really?
Oh yeah. I'm not doing me, but you could do me another day. Who knows? Yes, one of my family members also was active in animal charities and even Amnesty International in its very beginnings.
Really?
Yeah. So
Yes.
that's good, isn't it? I was hoping to thrill you, to be honest, with tales of daring do and fortitude in adversity. To be honest, I think this country's gone downhill since the Chinese burn has gone out of fashion. Of course, you wouldn't call it a Chinese burn, though, these days. You'd get in trouble.
With whom?
Well, the Chinese.
You'd get in trouble with the Chinese. Why, have they patented it or something? You can only use them under license.
There might be a copyright issue.
How do you think you might get around this copyright issue?
Yeah, call it an arm twist or a skin pinch or something.
Yeah, or just assault.
Well, these days they do call it assault.
Yes, and rightly so.
Well, you can be. Are you suggesting that if my little nipper is at school and he gives someone a Chinese burn, that's the end of his education? Sorry, a skin pinch. Is that the end of his education?
Well, what's the difference between him doing a ethnically generic burn on somebody and punching them in the face?
It's a grade. It's like hit you very lightly on the cheek, Chinese burn, knee in the balls, smack you in the face. It's a gradation. And when I say smack, I mean punch. You start with a smack, that's grade 1. Grade 4 is a punch right in the nose. That's the way it was in my school in Lancaster, George. I'm just telling you. You know, it's an unwritten rule.
What, that you must hurt other children?
Well, no.
All other children or just some?
The ones that don't get picked for football.
Well,
George, you're looking a bit. There's an expression of disgust on your face, George. I'm just telling you what happened.
And what you're describing is horrible.
Oh, it is. It is. I'm glad I survived. I'm glad I was on the bully side and not the bullied. Because that's how you get out of it.
Listen, this has been an absolute delight, as always. And we must do it again sometime.
Well, I can't do you again, can I, George? We've just done all your family.
Well, I mean, maybe we'll do something, I'm sure.
George, I would be thrilled to have you back if you, in the light of your investigations, can show us that your family were not, in fact, in any way evil.
If I have any success in standing that thesis up, then I'll let you know.
You do that. George, it's been fantastic. Let's sign off now with the tweets and the birdie song.